And you have a really interesting story about how the CIA tried to recruit you.
Have you ever thought about joining the CIA? I said, no, John, no, I never thought about it. He says, well, I work for the CIA. We'd really like to have you on board.
You've met Mick Jagger and you took him on a river and canal tour in Bangkok.
That's right. Mick invites me up to his room, poured me a beer. He had a big smile on his face, said, I'm on vacation.
Well, hello there, Internet. It's Pete here from Thairish Times. What's the story? You know, there was a period of my life where I quit coffee for a full year. Then what started happening was I started having a cheeky morning coffee. And that cheeky morning coffee led to me having two coffees, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And lately, I'm having 3 coffees a day. It's been like that now for the last 4 or 5 months. I just love the coffee in Thailand. Absolutely delicious. I'm having a nice latte now. Latte yen, my one cup, my Sainam Tan, no sugar. But anyway, you didn't click on this video to hear me talking about coffee. You clicked on this video because you saw CIA and you said, Pete has a CIA story, and that's what I have. I do. But first, let me explain who the guest is. This guest, his name is Joe Cummings. He is known by some as the guru of travel in Thailand and Southeast Asia. Why do you say that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because he wrote Thailand's first Lonely Planet guidebook. And he worked on the Lonely Planet guidebooks for 25 years. So we're going to talk to Joe about that, how he came to Thailand back in 1977, how it came to be that he wrote the Lonely Planet guidebooks. Then we're going to get into the CIA story, how the CIA tried to recruit Joe. And then we're going to get into a story which really blew my mind, a near-death experience. In a fishing boat, when the engine failed off the coast of Java, Joe was adrift in the open sea for 19 hours with a group of backpackers. They all thought they were going to die. They all thought the boat was going to capsize. Mind-blowing stuff. When I heard that story, my mind was just blown. Unbelievable, because I could picture myself in that boat. I know what it's like to be on the sea in rainy season. You know, it's choppy water. It's not easy, you know, and if an engine fails... Anyway, I'm telling too much now. Let's get into this interview. If you like this interview, hit the like button, leave me a comment, let me know what you thought about it, and if you can, share it with a friend. I think this one is worth sharing. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into the interview. Thanks very much. Joe.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you. Thanks very much for doing
Likewise.
this.
My pleasure.
I've done a lot of research on you over the last couple of days, and it's going to be a great interview because you have a really fascinating story.
All right.
So tell us, you came to Thailand first in 1977.
That's right.
What was that like, and why did you come here?
And the main reason I came, and I used to not say this right out because people would then just focus on that, get preoccupied with it, but I wanted to study Buddhism. I really got into, like, particularly Thai style, Theravada broadly, but more specifically Thai Buddhism when I was in college. I went to a Quaker college. So they had a lot of Eastern philosophy courses, and I was qualifying. The reason I went to a Quaker college is I was trying to qualify myself as a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War. And the draft boards in America, the only moral argument they would recognize to exempt you from military service was the Quaker. So I became a Quaker. And my first day as a freshman, you know, lonely, don't know anyone, first day of college, walked into the bookstore to look for something to read, and I picked up this book called Towards the Truth by Ajahn Buddhadasa, Thanajahn Puttatan, as they call him here. A very renowned monk. At the time, he was considered an outlaw in Bangkok. He was a renegade monk, considered a renegade monk. He wasn't in any way, he was very orthodox, but he was in the south. Didn't want to come to Bangkok and refused all clerical invitations for high positions because his Pali was very, very advanced for a guy from a country wat in Suratthani. And obviously his general knowledge of Dharma and the way people felt his wisdom was that he was a very high monk. But because he refused all those offers, sorry to be long-winded here, but it's important to me to make this connection now that later in life when I don't really care if people want to look at the Buddhist side of me. I vowed right then and there I wanted to meet this monk. And that's when I came here in 1977 to study Buddhism, and I joined the Peace Corps. That was my vehicle, the U.S. Peace Corps. But I didn't actually meet the famous monk, the renegade monk. He was suspected of being a communist because he would preach not just to government troops, but also to communist troops down in Surat. And all comers. He wouldn't take sides like most high monks in Thailand took sides. They were either right wing or left wing. Some of them tried to be in the middle, but they were constantly pushed to, for propaganda reasons in one way or the other, because the communist movement was huge back then. 10,000 armed insurgents. So you're asking what Thailand was like back in 1977. There were brown provinces, black provinces, classified according to how dangerous they were. Brown provinces were considered, you could travel in the daytime but not at night. Black provinces don't travel at all if you were not on the communist side. The last communists surrendered in Thailand, and armed communists surrendered in 1989, so they hung on for quite a while. But they reached their peak right then in the late 70s when I arrived, and I got into all of that. I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, and that's why I came.
All right, so 1977, and then you went back and you studied a master's in Southeast Asian civilization back in the States.
That's right. I went to UC, University of California, Berkeley, on a fellowship. I got everything paid for, my airfare, my tuition, my books, even an apartment. And it was called the Foreign Language and Area Studies Fellowship. And
did you go back and study that because you knew you were going to come back to Thailand? Was there a deep love for Thailand?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was what I ended up. So I had to pick two concentrations because it was a multidisciplinary degree. And originally I chose Southeast Asian art history because I got really into the whole historic temples and archaeology and architecture and everything. So it was Southeast Asian art history and Buddhism because of my interest in Buddhism. And then when I was halfway through my second year, getting close to graduation, 6 months away from graduation, I was talking to my academic advisor, and he realized, and it was, I wish I'd had more warning, but actually it turned out to be better in the long run. That my credits, it didn't look like there weren't enough courses for me to finish with enough credits to fulfill that concentration in Buddhism. So we switched right then and there to Thai language, which I've been studying all along anyway from day one during my master's. I was too advanced even on my first day. My Thai was too advanced already for normal classes, so I had to have one-on-one instruction from the Thai professor at Berkeley. So it didn't make any, it just meant that I continued my studies right through. So in the end, it was Thai language.
So you were pretty much fluent in Thai at the end of the master's?
Yeah. Before I wasn't. I mean, because I had the Peace Corps training, which was very good, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for 3 months. And I learned to read a bit, but not very well at all. I felt like I was pretty fluent. My conversation, my street Thai was great. I felt pretty proud and confident. And then when I got to grad school, I realized how little I actually knew. So by the time I finished my master's and came back to Thailand, it was like a curtain had been opened. I was just, I remember taking a taxi from the airport at Don Mueang, which was the only airport back then. And all of a sudden I could just read everything. Just all the billboards. It was an incredible experience without even trying. It was just like, it was almost like a different country.
Wow.
It had been decoded,
Yeah, you cracked the code.
Yeah.
So you wrote The Lonely Planet's first Thailand guidebook. Now, it's absolutely fascinating because the story behind that of how it came to be is really interesting. I'd love you to tell that story.
Okay. Growing up, I was exposed to a lot of literature. I lived with my family in France. We traveled a lot. I was three and a half years, like from age 10 to almost 14. And all the vacations, it was like, skiing in Switzerland in the winter or Naples in the summer. And my mother was a big guidebook and map person, and they were just all over the floorboards of the car. We went all over Europe with my sister and my parents. And so I was always like that. I was always reading guidebooks. And when I left to come back to the States, I went to a bookstore to see, I was going to go to India and Nepal. And I wanted to see if there were any guidebooks. And I saw these 2 Lonely Planet guidebooks at a bookstore here it was DK Books here in Bangkok. One was on Sri Lanka and one was on Burma, both written by Tony Wheeler, who started Lonely Planet. This is like 1978, 79. And I'd never seen them before, and I bought them both. I thought, well, maybe I'll go there too. I'll go to Sri Lanka, I'll go to Nepal and India, and then I'll maybe stop in Burma and Sri Lanka. And I read them. I could see they were in a whole new paradigm, really nothing like the guidebooks my parents read, the Fieldings, Fodors, and Farmers. Much more detailed, much more off the beaten track. And so I never actually got to either one of those countries. I carried them and read them while I was in India and Nepal. And then when I was doing my master's degree, I was starting to think, like, what am I going to do when this is finished? There's not much of a market for this. I probably would have to continue in academia and get a PhD somewhere. And I was going to apply to the University of London for a PhD program, but just on a whim, I wrote an aerogram to Tony Wheeler and said, I read your Sri Lanka and Burma book. They're really, really good. I did some research while I was during my master's program on tourism in Thailand. And did you know that Thailand gets twice as many tourists per year? This was back in 1980. Twice as many tourists per year than either Sri Lanka the two countries combined, Sri Lanka and Burma. And that got his attention. He wrote back, asked me to write a sample chapter, which I did. And he sent me $9,000, and I forgot about going to the University of London after that. So I came back. I actually, for my field studies in 1981, it was my last quarter at Berkeley. And so to do my field studies, I chose Thailand, of course. And I was double dipping, so while I was doing my field studies, I was also doing the first edition of Lonely Planet, which was released in '82.
What was the process of writing for The Lonely Planet? Like, you must have just traveled everywhere in the country.
Yeah. At that point, and even at the end of my research trip for Lonely Planet for that edition, I still hadn't gotten to every province. I mean, since then I've gotten to every province multiple times, but I could hit a lot. I probably got to. I should think about it. I should go back and actually look at the first guide, and then where I went. But felt like I got to maybe 2/3. That might be optimistic. It may be somewhere between half and 2/3. And but there wasn't any printed material. There weren't any other guidebooks. There hadn't been any guidebooks to Thailand since 1928. Eric Seidenfaden. There was a French guidebook that had some chapters on getting chauffeur to drive you to certain places around here and around Chiang Mai. It was very shallow. But it actually had some good archaeological stuff, some good historical information as well. But other than that, the way I got my info was just to roll into town and start asking around, start looking around, go to night markets. My favorite thing to do, I found one of the most productive activities was to go to a night market, Talat Tolung, where they have food and booze all night. Not so much booze all night anymore, but back then they did. And it wouldn't be long before someone would invite me to come to their table, some guys, and to share a drink, and then they were delighted that I could speak Thai, and then I would just say, "What's there to do around here?" And they'd tell me. Everyone would have a different opinion. Sometimes someone would offer to drive me to a waterfall outside of town that was supposed to be beautiful. The next day, I'd get on the back with a motorcycle, and I just did it like that. Yeah, and I spent a lot of time. There weren't many tourist hotels yet, so either I stayed in like hotels for salesmen, Thai Chinese hotels for traveling salesmen, which were great. They were like, averaged about 100 baht a night back then. And usually pretty okay, and had good food sometimes. But if I couldn't find one of those, like in a small town, then I'd stay in a temple. I'd just go to the temple and ask the abbot, is it okay if I spend the night here? Do the proper prostrations. And then they'd say, like, give me a place in the corner of a sala, like a pavilion, or sometimes a wihan, just on the floor. So I just throw a pakama on the floor. And that's where I slept many, many nights.
I'm sure you've had some really great adventures in Thailand. Anything that really stands out for you?
Well, because in the end, I did a lot more than just Thailand. Thailand was the first one. And then I did, in the mid-'80s, I started doing updates for Indonesia and Myanmar. I did Myanmar from 86 to 98, and all the updatings. And then I wrote further on in the late 80s, I did the first guidebook to Laos. And then I was also doing China in the late 80s for Lonely Planet, in the Philippines. I did everywhere except Vietnam, Cambodia, in Southeast Asia for them at one point. So I had a lot of adventures, and the one that sticks out the most was in Java in the late 80s when I was I shared a fishing boat. I chartered a fishing boat with some other backpackers. There were 11 of us at Cerita Beach on the west coast of Java, which is the closest point to Krakatau, the remnants of the greatest historic earthquake, volcano eruption in history, in recorded history. And there's kind of a semicircle of islands that you can visit, and some of them are still smoking and lava's coming out. It's quite scenic. So 11 of us got together and chartered a fishing boat, and the engine failed when we were coming back. We weren't even very far off the coast of those islands. We weren't even back into the bay. We were still in open sea. So it was a bay where it was pretty easy going. I noticed as soon as we got out of the bay on the way to the islands that this was a boat that's not really meant for the ocean sea, for the open sea. It was really struggling. The small engine was struggling a lot, but it was, we made it. We made it to Krakatau, but then coming back, a little bit choppier, and the engine just failed. They couldn't get it started again, and a tropical storm came up, a really nasty one where the waves were at least as high as this ceiling, and all night long for 26 hours, the boat would be on the verge of capsizing every 5 seconds or something. So we're all just clinging to the hull. Wow, it was just like. It was a nightmare. I mean, I'm surprised we didn't lose anyone overboard. I was holding on to the mast. There was a mast but no sail. That was my favorite spot. Some people were inside this little low cabin holding on to the benches, and some people everyone had a spot, and everyone kind of got into their own world. It was a great adventure psychologically for me, because I got to see how differently people react in a really life or death situation.
How did they react?
Well, I remember this one couple that seemed so in love, a young couple, very good looking, a boy and a girl, probably in their mid-20s. And when the shit hit the fan, they just went to opposite end of the boat. It's like they didn't want to be with each other. I don't know if something happened, but that was weird. And the guy that was the most macho guy, an Australian guy, big, wide chest, shirtless guy, who was kind of the ringleader in organizing the boat. Because I remember I wasn't even planning to go out there. I was just lazing on the beach, and he came by and said, good day, Mike. And he talked me into going in on this trip, which, obviously was a mistake. And, but he broke down. He was the most terrified of all. The rest of us were trying to calm him down, tears were streaming down his face, and he was shaking we were wrapping, pieces of fabric around him between the waves, and then finally, the seas calmed. We were still alive. I wasn't so afraid of dying. I should have been, but I remember thinking, in my backpack, I had all my notes for this 3-month research trip in Indonesia. Back then, I would spend average 3 months doing research, and I thought, I'm going to lose my notes. But, I had this image of myself bobbing in the sea, holding my notes up there. I can't lose these. So that was the biggest adventure. I actually wrote about it for a few magazines.
26 hours, you said. You were
total. That includes the way out. We were actually, sorry. Yeah, so the actual adrift part was maybe -7, so 19 hours. Yeah, 19
And
hours.
eventually what happened? Did you just...
Well, I remember asking when the seas calmed down and they went back to see if they could fix the engine. And I could speak a little bit of Indonesian. I was the only one that could. And I talked to, it was 2 guys. And I said, what happens if you can't get the engine started? He says, we're done, because we're not in any shipping lanes. And the current runs straight to India. And maybe, a week from now, we might cross the shipping lane, but there's no ships in this area. So we'll never make it that far. We have to get the engine. And they asked me, for some reason, they said, would you come and sit in the engine hold while we fix the engine? So I went down there. It's a disgusting smell, it didn't make me feel kind of seasick. Because that was the other thing, everyone vomited on the boat among the 11 others except me and a Scottish guy who was, both of us were both on the deck, just in front of the cabin. And I knew this trick for avoiding seasickness that I told him. I said, keep your eyes on the horizon. Then when the sun goes down, imagine that you still can see the horizon. Just keep that horizon there. That'll keep your inner ear steady. As I'd been taught that earlier, many years earlier. And it worked. It worked for both of us. Or maybe it was just mind over matter, but we didn't get seasick. But so I was down in that hold, and I thought, well, now I am going to get seasick. There's the smell of diesel and I couldn't see the horizon, But they just insisted that I sit there. And what they did was they used a hammer and a chisel, and they dismantled the entire engine, no other tools, a hammer and chisel. One of them took some shoe leather and carved out a new gasket to make a tighter seal in the manifold, put it back together and started. And we got back about 5 hours later.
What was the feeling when you put your feet on the sand?
Everyone was just kissing the beach and the sea legs, that feeling, that lasted like 24 hours. I was just totally unsettled, But it was amazing to be back. Everyone was hugging and kissing each other. And
what about that couple?
They were back together, and the Australian guy apologized. He apologized for freaking out, and then he apologized for talking us into the whole thing. Because I talked to the guest house owner. The owner of the guest house I was staying in that night, a German guy, and he said, "I wish you'd told me these fishing boats cannot make it there and back. It's just not. You're lucky you made it back." He said that we've lost a couple people never seen again.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's an incredible story.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote about it. I don't know if it was online or not, but I did it for a couple magazines, and it was a chapter in a book called I Should Have Stayed Home, The Worst Trips of Great Travel Writers. Well, I was very flattered to be in that category, but that's, I like that little piece of writing. It was fun.
What inspired you to become a writer?
I didn't want to be a writer, but I was always good at it. As a kid, all of my teachers, English teachers especially, said, "Joe, you're really good. You should do more of this. Why don't you take my composition?" But I always just looked at it as salesmanship. For me, it was just like they were pitching for I don't know. And then I got to college. It was all through high school, the same thing. You should be an English major. I remember my English professor at Guildford College asked me to come to his office, and he said, "Mr. Cummings, I really like your essays. Why don't you become an English major? I see you're doing political science. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be doing English. You're too good a writer." I said, "No, I don't want to be a writer. That sounds so boring. It's like we're nerds." And he said, "Well, what are you going to do with political science?" I said, "Well, I'm not going to do political science either. I don't know how I got into that, but I want to be a musician." And then he said, "Did you know that Bob Dylan has a degree in English literature from Columbia University?" I went, he almost had me there. I was like, "Really?" I actually checked it later, and he lied. It's not true. I guess there was something there, but it was not an ambition of mine. I only did it so I could travel.
You've written a lot of books. I think, nearly 40 books?
Probably around there, yeah.
That's a lot of writing.
Yeah, for a guy that didn't want to be a writer.
Yeah. Which book are you most proud of?
There's two. So these two books are the only books I've done that have truly original research, other than research that, unless you want to count like travel research where I'm on foot and I'm the first person to write about this destination. Of course, that's original research. But original academic research, only two books in which that appears. And that's The Buddhist Stupas of Asia. No, it's called Buddhist Stupas of Asia, The Shape of Perfection. And the second one is Sacred Tattoos of Thailand. In both of those, what I did was, while doing all my literature review and reading all the literature I could find, academic and non-academic, on those phenomena, well, they're both kind of like subcultures, building of stupas and the architecture of stupas, and then sacred tattoos, sakyan. But there's never been an integrated theory on either one of them that kind of ties it all together and proposes one unified theory on why it exists and why it's important, or why it's important to the people in that world, not important to everyone at large. So I did that for both of those subjects, and so those are the ones I'm most proud of.
So Joe, when I was doing the research on this, one big name popped up, a big name that you've met. You've met Mick Jagger, and you took him on a river and canal tour in Bangkok.
That's right.
What was that like?
That was fun, yeah. I mean, it ended up being a lot more than that. That was the original plan, was just to go do that river and canal tour, spend the day with them, and never see them again. But it was just during their 2003 tour, world tour, and they had just played, they were scheduled to play Bangkok the week that, the reason I got involved was that a film producer called me, who heard about me through someone else that I might be a good person to talk to come up with ideas. They were doing a documentary on the Bigger Bang tour, and they wanted ideas about what to do with each of the band members in Bangkok. And I guess they did the same thing in every city on the tour. And so I gave them ideas what to do with each one of them. I said, yeah, I know these guys, by reputation, and I think I know what they like. And so I came up with ideas. And he said, thank you very much. And I was living in Chiang Mai, actually, at the time, not Bangkok. And 3 days later, Mick arrived ahead of the rest of the band. They just played in Mumbai. And but he's, as I found out, he's just a real traveler, just loves to travel. And he just wanted to go ahead with it and get to Bangkok and spend a few days on his own. And while the entourage of 140 in the private jumbo jet for the Rolling Stones was back in Bombay. And the producer called me back, Lawrence Ellman, and said, Mick's in town. I gave him your ideas, and he likes your ideas very much. There's just one problem. I said, what's that? He says, he wants you to be along, or he's not going to do it. So I said, sure. So I flew down the next day. So I spent the day with him doing, what was requested, and there were all the cameras, and that at the end of the day, everyone's, members all go back to their hotel rooms. All the equipment's been gathered up and we're done. Mick invites me up to his room and up to his suite on the 16th floor. So I went up there, of course, and we just started talking. I noticed right away in this huge suite, there was like half the 16th floor. On one of the coffee tables, there were guidebooks and coffee table books about this tall, a stack about this tall. And there was at least 4 titles with my name on it in there. And that's actually what he told me when we first met when we were getting on the boat earlier that day. He said, I know you're from your work. I know you're from your work. But then I knew he wasn't bullshitting when I actually saw the books there. And so he changed clothes and I had a shower. I talked to his girlfriend, Lorraine, the one that later killed herself. And he said, I'm just take a shower. I'll be right back. Poured me a beer. And came back all clean. And I saw him put on his T-shirt. This guy can't be 59. He's got like a 6-pack, totally flat abdomen. And he got a phone call that he picked up, so, not screened. And I heard his end of the conversation. And basically, the Bangkok gig was canceled because a truck ran into the running gear of that plane on the runway in Mumbai. So they had to, actually it wasn't canceled at that point. No, it was canceled because they'd already tried, so they moved it to, because they were supposed to fly 2 days in advance. So this would give them, if they wanted to fly the next day, so they have 1 day in advance. And FAA or whatever, the airports authority here wouldn't give them permission, they couldn't give them flight plans with that short a notice. So they had to cancel the concert. And by the time Mick hung up the phone, closed his phone, he said, I assumed he'd be kind of angry and sad or whatever, upset. He had a big smile on his face, said, I'm on vacation. So then I spent several more days showing him around privately. And then he went to Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar. We were on the phone constantly. I wasn't with him personally, but I led him through those 3 countries by phone. And then he came back a couple more times to Bangkok. We hung out also. I also hung out in 2006. He invited me to New York for the Beacon Theater concert with Martin Scorsese films. So I was in the 10th row for that. So we had a nice little run there.
And you went on a night out with him in Bangkok as well.
Several nights.
And you said you'd
over different trips, over 2 trips, 3 trips.
Yeah, you said you'd never divulge that information. No. What happened on that night out, but for Thairish Times, maybe you could tell give us the exclusive.
You know what? No, I couldn't do that. I can't even tell you where we went. We went to so many places, but a lot of it's just, I feel it's his private life, and it's kind of.
What's he like as a person?
He's really, really. First of all, he's really bright. He's really well read. I should have expected that, but because he went to London School of Economics and all that. But still, it kind of surprised me. I have an uncut video from that day when the camera's just me and him having a conversation for 45 straight minutes. And when I watch it now, I'm just struck by how bright the guy is. It's just like he's asking lots of questions about Thailand, obviously history, and he knows a lot already. He'd already been to Thailand several times. He wasn't a newbie like I thought he would be. And he relates stuff I'm saying to other places he's been and to books he's read. And when I watch the two of us having a conversation, I think of myself as a fairly intelligent person, but I'm clearly, he's way out of my league, you know. The expression's the other way around. I'm out of his league. You know what I mean? He makes me feel intellectually.
I know what you're saying when you meet someone that's just on that next level when it comes to intellect. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about Anthony Bourdain?
Anthony Bourdain. Well? I did. I worked with him twice, and yeah, that's a really interesting. Because he was not in a good place, you know. He was a really nice man and really fun to hang out with. I sourced locations for them in Chiang Mai. I went on a few of the shoots, and I, of course, appeared on camera. I wrote some music. They asked me to write music for a karaoke scene, a country karaoke scene. And then they asked me after I wrote the music, they said, and we want you to perform it. And I said, oh, my God. And because it was a tribute, it was like an homage to the James Caan scene in City of Ghosts, the Matt Dillon film about Cambodia. So almost every episode of Bourdain by that time, in Parts Unknown, there was some hidden Easter egg, like it was usually a tribute to some film. That was the one for that thing. I think most people that watched it probably didn't realize that, but he had. We had some private conversations in which he told me, "Oh, I'm burnt out. I wish I could get out of this game.
Really?
I've had it. And I said, well, do it. And he said, I can't. There's too many people that depend on me. I really want to. He said, I want to change my name, move to like a fishing village on the coast of Vietnam, and just be on my own. I'm like, after 9 years of doing this, it's no fun anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a very sad story. Well, let's move on to the CIA. And you have a really interesting story about how the CIA tried to recruit you.
This was also while I was a grad student at Berkeley, doing my master's. And it was the second year, right between the third and fourth quarters. And I was preparing to do my field studies, to come back in Thailand and do that, and also simultaneously research for the first edition of the Lonely Planet Thailand Guide. And there was a Thai student at Berkeley that I was introduced to at the beginning of that year, my second year of my master's. My Thai professor had, I just showed up at one class one day, and there was an older Thai man, older to me at the time, he was 45. And introduced him as John. He had an English name. He said, this is John. He's a physics student here, and he's looking for a foreign language credit. We got an easy one for him to do Thai. He asked if he could sit in, and I thought it would be a good idea because it would give you another native speaker of Thai, so you're not just getting my idiolect, but two different idiolects, you know, in a linguistic perspective. Of course, I said, sure. I was also very, anything that was Thai at the time, I was so eager and ambitious and just like, yeah, give it to me. What's this? I'll eat it. I'll do, you know, anything Thai was just no filter, you know, just bring it on. So it didn't even seem odd to me. In fact, it objectively looking back, it wasn't super odd. But then we sort of became friends through that experience. He started showing up so that, you know, Thai, people studying Thai, there weren't many of us. I think there were 5 to 10 of us at Berkeley then. And, we'd have little suppers, and we'd arrange we'd do like a Thai movie at someone's house. And there were also some Thai events with Thai students and the larger Thai student community. We'd go to those events. And so John would come along, and he always kind of drifted towards me, and I was happy. You know, wow, I got a Thai friend, you know, here at the university. And he, very early in the relationship, like 3 months in, he realized my hobby was playing electric guitar, and he said, you know, I really dig that too. I also play guitar, and he went out and bought a guitar. He invited me to his apartment once. He had an apartment right opposite Sather Gate. Very hard to get an apartment for anyone, even a non-student. Nice apartment, wood floors, historic house, and so he invited me there like around the same time we were talking about guitar, and he said, look what I've got. And he had a brand new Gibson ES3 45 stereo guitar. A guitar at the time, there's no way I could afford one myself. And a twin reverb amp, also brand new, much too powerful of an amp to have at home for a hobbyist. He could barely play. He could play, but not much. It was like stuff was way out of his league. And that's the only red flag I really, looking back, I don't know why I didn't think that was odd. I guess I probably did think it was odd. I probably just thought, this guy's a real nerd. He's a little bit, stalkerish almost, But again, I gave him a pass because he was Thai, and I wanted Thai stuff in my life, so I didn't put up any, I was just, come on, let's go. And so I always felt like, I even introduced him to my wife at the time, an American woman I was married to. And we had a few social occasions, usually with some other people involved. But I always felt like there was just a little bit of a forced friendship. Anyway, he invited me to dinner between the third and fourth quarter at Berkeley, at a brand new Thai restaurant. It was probably the third Thai restaurant in Berkeley at the time. It was called Cha'am, like the small town here. And as it turned out, it was pretty authentic for that era, 1981. And the first time he'd ever invited me out privately, other than to his apartment on campus, or next to campus. And so, we ordered some stuff. I let him do the ordering. I said, you get it. We're sharing food, we're talking small talk. I mostly spoke to him in English sometime, but his English was almost perfect. And he said, so what are you going to do? After graduation, when you get back from your field studies, it's almost done. Your master's is almost done. And I said, well, John, it's like, what can you do? It's not much. I never really think about that. I've always just done what I feel like doing, so that's why I did the master's. I don't have a career plan for it. I am doing this guidebook for this company no one's ever heard of called Lonely Planet, so maybe that'll turn into something. And but that's it. I don't have any plans. And a few beats later, he says, "Well, have you ever thought about joining the CIA?" I laughed. I figured it was kind of a joke. I said, "No, John, no, never thought about it." He said, well, the salary and the benefits are quite good. And I said, John, what do you know about the salary and benefits of the CIA? He says, well, I work for the CIA. We'd really like to have you on board. And my whole world, literally the room was spinning. I realized that this whole thing was a setup, the whole friendship, studying Thai together, it was all leading up to this moment. And I actually felt like vomiting. And it just seemed so unreal. I said, John, how is it? You work for the CIA? I said, how did you get in? He said, well, I'm a really electrical engineer, and I used to do wiretapping in Bangkok as contract with the CIA for Eastern Bloc countries, Soviet Bloc countries. This is pre-Berlin Wall falling. And then I just worked my way up, and this is what I do now. I'm a recruiter on college campuses, university campuses. And then I said, well, I'm sorry that you wasted your time because I'm just not going to do it. I'm not interested. It's dangerous, I've heard. And he said, and then I said, besides, because then he said something about, well, you don't even know what assignment you would get. You can't say that it's dangerous, that was a good point. So then I came back with, well, John, I was an anti-war protester. I used to organize student strikes and student moratoriums in Northern Virginia and D.C. in the late 60s and early 70s. And I was about to tell him some particular demonstrations I was involved in, two massive ones I was involved in. And he interrupted me and said, Joe, we know all that, and we love it. It shows you you have a talent for subterfuge. I went, wow, okay. Trying to think of some other reason that could be disqualified. I've taken drugs. John, I've taken drugs, a lot of drugs, all kinds of drugs. He says, we know that too, Joe. It's not a problem. In fact, once you're with us, you can have anything you want. And I got no more, I can't think of anything else. So I just said, I won't do it. I can't do it. He goes, okay. And we went right back to small talk, and because that's the context I know him in, and I just, all of a sudden the nausea went away. We finished the meal, went home. I told my wife, she was like shocked, and went back to class like a couple days later. He was gone. He wasn't in the class. He didn't come in. I said, what's happened to John? I asked my professor, and he said, I don't know. No idea. I haven't seen him either. I went over to the apartment just off campus, looked through the window, big picture windows next to the door. All the furniture was gone, the amplifier, the guitar, all gone.
He disappeared.
Disappeared. There is a coda to the story. 2 years later, I walked into Cha'am, the same restaurant, and he was coming out, and he looked like a college-age kid. And they were walking out of the restaurant. And I reflexively, not even thinking about the CIA thing, to me, it's just an old friend. I went, John, like this. And he just blinked. He just went right on past me. And I never saw him again after that.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Whoa, imagine if you had said yes.
Well, I never, sometimes I wonder.
Imagine how different your life would have been.
I know. It's funny, I always remembered what happened, but I never thought about that. I never asked myself that question until maybe 10 years ago. I think as you get older, you start looking back and realize that there were so many forks in the road in your life that lots of things could have been different. So I probably asked myself about, but imagine it would have been, I might be dead now, Or
else you could be extremely wealthy with a massive house somewhere.
That's yeah. Yeah, I think about that sometimes. Yeah. I actually met an ex-CIA guy. I've met a few over the years. Sometimes I meet him when I'm out doing research. I met him in Myanmar and stuff. But I was invited to dinner at a fellow's house. So it was a mutual friend. I hadn't met the guy. A guy said, hey, a friend of mine's having a dinner party on Lung Suan, which is where I live, the same road I live on, just a few doors down. And I said, sure, let's go. And his friend lived in the penthouse on the west side of Soi Lung Suan. Behind my apartment building, this is a strange coincidence, is a bunch of white buildings. They call it the U.S. Embassy Annex. It runs out to Ratchadamri. And there's a royal villa right in front. I forgot what it's called. Not Ratchadamri. Anyway, it's the name of the family. And they obviously lease it, the property, to the U.S. government. But that mansion is still in front, that royal villa. And it's really high security, very much more impenetrable than the embassy itself or the ambassador's residence. Anyway, I'm up in the penthouse. During dinner, it's already come up that, he's quite open about being retired CIA. And he's probably around 65, 70 years old. And we're having drinks after dinner, and we go to the back window of his condo, of his penthouse, that faces that way, and you can see all those low white buildings. And he said, you see that? I said, yeah, I live right in front of it, the U.S. Embassy Annex. He says, that's the largest CIA base in Asia.
Whoa.
I live right in front of it. It's just so strange.
So you're seeing these guys all the time? These foreigners?
Yeah, it's all foreigners going in and out. And they have like bomb-proof container for every vehicle that goes in. They go inside a bomb-proof container and it's closed, and in case it blows up. And they have really thick walls, and they have cameras on the outside. So if I'm walking by for a friend, I always like to look in the camera and say, by the way, Jim, did you know this is the largest CIA base in Asia?
Let's talk about your life in Thailand. So you play in a band over here as well, don't you?
Yep, I played in a few, but yeah, I'm playing in one now. It's coincidentally, it really is a coincidence. It's a Rolling Stones cover band.
Okay, cool. And you play all over Bangkok and different places in Thailand?
Yeah, we played probably 6 or 7 gigs a month here in Bangkok, and we played in a few places up country.
If someone's watching this now and they want to come to one of your gigs,
we'd love it. Yeah.
Well,
our Facebook page, Midnight Ramblers, that's the best because we announce all the gigs there. We're playing this Thursday night at Jam, small kind of punk club on just off Satorn, and then Sunday night at Green Room in Sukhumvit Soy 7/1, and then we play Speaker Box once a month. We play Smalls probably once a month. Smalls is my favorite gig because it's just such a cool.
It's a cool place. I've been there. It's a great place. I love it.
With all those velvety curtains and stuff, it's got great sound, and then it's a pretty intelligent crowd. So it's, they don't just want to hear the hits like Brown Sugar, and they're into the more deeper cuts sometimes. Anyway, so yeah, that's fun.
Are you happy with everything? How your life is going here in Thailand?
Yeah.
Could you see yourself here now for the long haul?
I think I'll stay. Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. People come and go, right? As you know, expats come and go. But I'm pretty entrenched here, and I've been here for so long, and I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be, really, despite all the, whatever problems Thailand has. I just like, I like being here. I'm working on citizenship now, so I'll be, that's when I'll really be happy, when I get citizenship. I mean, that's the last check mark on my life bucket list.
Joe, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
I really
likewise.
like listening to your story.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
And I'm really happy to tell it, especially the CIA story and Mick Jagger as well.
All right.
Who can believe that we have a Mick Jagger story on Thairish Times? Anyway, folks, if you enjoyed that video, hit the like button, leave us a comment, and share the video if you can. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.